All right, so starting off, we have to understand what we are dealing with here. We are given 4 different points, so we have a finite function. So our domain is going to be a list of our x values. So start off with our smallest and work our way up from there. And our range is going to be a list of our y values. Again, start from our smallest and work our way up from there. As we continue down, we're looking for the domain and range and interval notation. So domain, we read that from left to right. So it looks like we start off at like 1 point, maybe 8. So at our leftmost point, so about here, we do have a gap at -1. And we keep going until we get to 4. We have another gap. And then it looks like we end at like 5.1. So again, gaps are going to be these open dots. Means we don't have values there. We have a discontinuity. It stops. Our range start at the bottom. Looks like we're at like -4.1, so it's like a touch below -4. We go all the way up through -1, and then we have our first gap. We start back again at +2. It looks like we only go to like 2.25 before we stop. So again, all the way up from here to here, we have points accounted for, and then from here to here, we have points accounted for. We used the ruler in class yesterday to show as long as the ruler is touching something, it's part of our range. So ruler is touching something, and this big gap, and then again, we're touching something. Our bottom 2 examples here, a little bit of work must be done. So logarithms, we're not going to have 0, so we have to make sure that it is greater than 0. So x minus 4 has to be positive, has to be greater than 0. So in this case, add 4 to both sides, and we're going to have a domain of x is greater than 4. So if we look at that on a number line, if we're at 4, bigger than 4 is to the right of 4. So our domain in interval notation starts at 4 and it ends at infinity. So again, logs must be positive, which is why we take what is inside of this log and make it greater than 0, because it must be positive. Okay. Our domain below, we have 2 things we must account for. So the first thing is that our denominator cannot be equal to 0. So solving for this, we know that -14 is not included in our domain. And the second piece is that inside of our roots, this x minus 7, that must be greater than or equal to 0. So we can't have a negative square root, so whatever the inside of that root works out to must be greater than or equal to 0. So when we look at this, we can see that x must be greater than or equal to 7. So for our domain, we're going to see that x is greater than or equal to 7. But also that x is not equal to -14. So wherever -14 is at the number line, there's also a gap there. So 2 things that we need to account for, one for the numerator and one for the denominator.